Assalamu alaikum, everyone. People who can hear me. Uh, I hope you guys are doing well. And thank you so much for joining in for this webinar today. Uh, so before moving on, I want to just say, I want to give a huge shout out to RubyConf PK for arranging these, webinar series because they're trying to establish a culture around the tech communities in Pakistan that I wish that had been previously they should have been done previously in the recent times. So but still I wish them the very best for the future to arrange such kind of events. They surely work hard, and we should appraise them. So we're going to today we're going to talk about REST API with Grape. So before that, let me just give you a little introduction about myself. So my name is Zain Butt. I am a software engineer at Sendoso.com. Sendoso. Basically, I work in the fulfillment team that was formerly known as Swims. So we're gonna kind of take care of all the things that happen in a warehouse, as well as shipping things to other countries or people. So you guys can follow me at Medium by the name _Zain _Butt. I write there often about my experiences. And if you want to get in personal touch with me, you can use my email, zain@sendoso.com. So today we're going to go talk about creating REST API with Grape. So, before we move on, I want to, establish a basic understanding for people to know what a REST API is. So API stands for an application programming interface that actually helps us talk to other programs or other services on the internet or off the internet. So, and REST means REST is basically a convention to make them. It explains that it states that our API should be self-explanatory and should tell what resources are we requesting and what operation we would like to perform. The type of HTTP request determines the kind of operation what we want to do. Every HTTP request has something called a verb or a method that determines its intentions. So we have some standard methods as a get that we can use to request a certain resource from other service. For example, like movies. This /movies means you can call that, and the other service would return you a bulk of data, chunk of data, or some data regarding movies. So and there's another called post that we use to create some resource on the internet or somewhere else, anywhere. To update, we use the put, but we need to provide the specific ID of that resource that we want to update. For example, in a movie, if we want to update its title, we would be using a put request to update that. Similarly, to delete certain resource, we would use the same URL, but the HTTP verb would be delete. That would state that to delete the resource that we are requesting. So as now we have covered what a REST API is and what goes into that. So but creating them is a challenge. There are few challenges to creating them. Before you start to think about, oh, I'm gonna make some REST APIs, you need to consider what format you would be using, what kind of versioning would be you'll be using, how will you be versioning your API, so you can be sure of the backward compatibility. Because if you change your API and the existing users will be affected by that change, you have to consider the existing users that are using your API. So you have to version your APIs and entertain all the users, new ones and as well as the existing ones. So other things such as authentication, validations of your params, logging of your requests, exceptions, and so much more. There are like many things to consider before we move into creating REST APIs, but we have a solution. It's called Grape. Yes, Grape is basically a framework, a Ruby framework, so that helps us to make you know REST APIs by overcoming all these challenges. Providing very powerful features right out of the box. So you guys can see, or you guys can get read the documentation for this framework at this GitHub link. Let me just quickly show you the Grape API. This is basically the Grape API, the table of contents. As you can see, there are tons of stuff that you can do with your with this framework. The features it provides, it's bonkers. It's really nice to have so many features right out of the box, and it helps you create them really easily and fast. So more about Grape framework is like, as I mentioned, it's REST-like API framework for Ruby because it provides all the conventions that are in, and that goes into creating REST-like applications. It also provides a simple DSL to develop those APIs. DSL actually means domain-specific language. What that states is that they have created a specific language using Ruby, because meta programming. So they have used Ruby to create another language, but that language is not general purpose. It's specifically targeted for doing specific things like creating RESTful APIs. So that's hence DSL. So as I said, it has built-in support for common conventions, as I mentioned, validations, exception handling, other tons of stuff. So this was a general theoretic, a little introduction to Grape API. So I know you guys would be eager to move in to the code itself. So we would do that. But before diving into the code, there's something at Sendoso that we do before all the meetings. We actually stand up and stretch a little, so that it helps us get a little focused. It helps us to focus more and makes our juices running. So I would appreciate all of you that standing up for just 1 minute, or like less than 1 minute, to just stand up and stretch your arms and your head, shake your head. I'm going to do it as well, so it will be really nice. It will be running it will help you run your juices. So I hope you have stretched. So I would we are back. So as I said, I've set up the application beforehand. So some resources, I've also just did a scaffold of a resource called Movie. I would go ahead beforehand. I will just show you guys how would this look. This is the sample application that I have and we're back. So first off, I'll be going into my gem file, and I will add the gem Grape, and do a bundle install. I've already added and bundle installed into my application, so I won't save time. So you guys, when you are integrating it, go ahead and button install, as well as don't forget to restart your application, restart the server. So before I begin, so how are we talking in terms of Rails? How we going to integrate in Rails the Grape? So first off, we need to namespace that application inside our Rails application, so that we know that it's separated from our other code base. So I'm going to go ahead and just create a simple a simple directory inside app by the name API. Yep. So I'm going to go ahead. This marks that this says that this would mean we would tell Rails that our API functionality resides in this folder. So I'm going to go ahead and create another directory by the name. You can name anything. This would be the application that we are going to develop. So I'm going to just go ahead and name it grapes, because we like grapes. Yep. Yeah. So this is the namespace. This is the all domain that our API application will live in. To further begin, I would just create a simple, simple file called api.rb. Yep. So this would be the base class, the fundamental class we would be working in. This would be the class that will be interacting with all the other APIs that you create, that you would be creating those APIs in this file, or at least connecting them or integrating them in this file. So I'm going to go ahead and simply write a module called grapes, because this is the name of our namespace folder. So I'm going to go ahead and create a simple API class that would be inheriting from Grape API class. So this would mean just like application controller or application record, we would be creating our API class. All right. So I would like to stop here and move towards another thing that we need to address before diving in. We need to tell Rails how to connect the routes that would be coming into our application and forward them to the Grapes API application. So I'm going to quickly open up my routes file, and I'm going to mount the Grape endpoint that we are mounting inside Rails app. So I'm going to use the function mount, and I'm going to tell which API to hit API application to mount. So I'll be using this, and we need to tell the route to which it will mount the API routes. So I'm going to just use the root route for that. So this is all we're going to do inside the routes file. We don't need to go ahead and you can just close it if you're like going along with me. So as I said in the presentation, that there are tons of things that Grapes provide us in terms of features like versioning our APIs, formatting, other validations and stuff. So we're going to go ahead and use some of those features that apply to the API framework or the API application on the high level. Something like, what format are we going to use for our APIs? We're going to use a JSON format for our APIs. So, excuse me. So another thing that we want is that to differentiate our routes, simple application routes from our API routes. So I'm going to use the prefix method that would tell Grape to, use the prefix API for any route, in the start of any route. And the same goes with the version. I'm going to use the version method and provide it v1, because this is the first version of our API, and hopefully there will be other versions. And when we are specifying the version, there are multiple, techniques that you can provide version information. You can use the URL path, you can use the headers, maybe, or you can use any other thing. There are three to four, excuse me. You can make use multiple options. So one of them actually. So I'm going to use a simple option that is familiar with everyone. I'm going to use the path option. Yep, it's very simple. As you can see, this is the, as you can see, these are just simple function calls that will reduce your work like a lot. So I'm going to go ahead. First, I'm going to go ahead and change the font size for my editor. Hmm. Okay, so yeah, I hope you guys can see the font size right now. It's much bigger. Okay, so we're going to continue. So now the basics of our application is there. Rails knows there is an API application inside, inside me, and we have set up basic structure, the fundamental structure, bare bones that could be used as API app. So now let's go ahead and create some APIs. I'm going to go ahead and create. So for this app, I've just, as I said, I have scaffolded a website, scaffolded some model called movies. So I'm going to go with that, and I'm going to create a file by the name movies.rb that I would specify. Yeah, we're going to get movies from this app. Yep. So we're going to write, going to start ahead writing the bare bones for this module. So I'm going to go ahead and write the basic stuff because we're inside the V1 module. Yep. So now the real thing that comes in that we are making movie class to serve the movies. So it's also going to inherit from our Grapes API we just created. Grapes API we're just going to inherit is from here. So moving on, there are, as I mentioned in my presentation, there are several ways to create. There are several things that goes into creating RESTful services, RESTful APIs. There are certain verbs that we need to handle, like get, post, put, and delete. They all means we're going to get some resources, or we're going to update or delete some resources. So first off, what we're going to do is we are this is the bare bones, and we are not going to jump in, start in creating our APIs. We're going to follow an approach called TDD, test-driven development. That means that dictates that we should write our test beforehand, before we actually dive into our code. So that would mean we are writing tests to audit our application. Also, it helps as the proper documentation for our app, and it tells what you can expect from an application. So I'm going to go ahead. I have side note. I have integrated RSpec in this application, sample application, and we will be writing request specs. As you can see, I have a folder by the name request specs, and I have a file already there, so that we're going to write some tests inside first, and then we're going to create that API. So this will be first test and then code to test if our code is passing or not. So we're going to go ahead. So first off, the most basic the API would be to get some resources, get some movies from our server. We want to expose an API that would send some movies back to the user. So this will be I'm going to use the describe block that would actually describe about the get movies namespace or name API. I hope there's a small prerequisite for this thing, that you are somewhat familiar with RSpec, and you are comfortable with the testing and stuff. So I'll be explaining some of the test terminologies in this. So even if you have any questions, so let me just comment it out, and I'll definitely get back. So first test should be that we are, before writing, tons of tests, I think step back and think what kind of, scenarios there are. What should be the scenarios you want to test in your application? So if I'm requesting a tons of movies from, like someone is requesting from my application, it should at least give them a proper response status code, as well as the the movies itself. So these are two at least basic things that my API should do. So I'm going to go ahead and write our first test that would give us that would confirm that we are returning a proper success code to our user. So it would say something like returns success code. And so in our request specs, we actually are able to request to our mimic a request to our that URL. So if you can see the type request, it actually adds some of the methods that would help us doing that. Something like get. The get method would actually perform a get request on any specific URL that we pass it. So in this case, we have API v1, the version, prefix version, and then our movies resource. I hope that makes sense to you all, guys. This is, if not, feel free to post any comment and I'll get back to you, inshallah. So when we are testing, we are expecting, right? We are expecting something from the API. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to expect that my API should return something. So in the request spec, we have, RSpec makes a response variable or response method available to us after we have requested or made request to some route or URL. So this response would contain something, hopefully. So there's a method called to that expects that ensures that they should match to some other criteria. So I'm going to go ahead and write. I'm going to expect against some HTTP status, and I'm going to expect that our API, the movies API, give us the 200 status code. So I'm going to go ahead and test it within my RubyMine IDE. I'm going to run it, and for sure it should fail because we have nothing to support, no code base to support it, and it should fail. Right, as expected, it should fail because it says that we don't have any API v1 routes. So what we're going to do, it's very clear. So what we're going to do, we're going to make API or a simple route to support that. So to do that, it's very Grape uses some conventions that are really similar to Rails. So in terms, when we specify any routes in our routes file, so we use the resources method that would create some routes. So similarly, we would use the same method inside Grape and pass it a block. So now this means that we are going to create something. So now at least we're going to go into our test, and I'm going to run it again because now we have a route, but it should still fail. I hope you guys can see that. Yeah, the test failed, right? As expected. I'm going to go ahead still because there are no routes to cater that. So I'm going to go ahead because we are, you know, we're going for the get API v1 movies route. So it would be, maintain that. All right. So we're going to, you'll feel when we're creating APIs, it's very intuitive and very easy DSL to learn. Get means I'm going to perform, or this should run, this block, this thing should run when we have a get request. So I'm going to pass a block to it. And to be honest, this is our API for, for getting all the movies for this route. And whenever this route's gonna come in, request, Grape is going to match and run this for us. So what should be there when we, what should we return? So it's very simple. We should return all the movies because this is such a simple application. So this thing would do. There's another thing in our in Grape that Grape provides us is that we can document our APIs by using simple methods called Esc Description. So you can actually write some simple description. I'm going to just say return all movies, right? So anybody who reads that, he knows, okay, this is for returning all the movies. So I'm going to go ahead and run this again. Okay, it's saying no route. Oh yeah, so right, see, advantages of writing tests can actually help you identify the bugs that you are you're going to introduce into your app. So what we forgot is to tell Grape that dude, we have this resource that you need to insert into integrate into yourself. So we're just going to write that. So we're going to use the function mount again, and we are going to add grapes v1, and we're going to add movies. So now Grape is aware that we have something called the movies, a resource. See, this is the advantages of writing tests first. So this is saying that we have grapes V1, undefined grapes V1. Hmm. We do have grapes V1 and okay. I'm just gonna go ahead and I believe this is due to I haven't restarted my server. Let me just restart it to make sure everything is fine. Yep, it's throwing us some error. All right, let's investigate it. Uninitialized constant grapes v1. We have the grapes over here, API, with API. Oh, see, we forgot to add a v1. V1, and we're gonna move this inside the V1. So it would be versioned. So we can create another version, simply add another folder and write another other API. So this is benefits of writing tests first. So I'm going to go ahead and restart my server. Right, I'm going to go ahead and run my test one more time, and I hope this passes again. And voila, our test passes. So this was the first test that we wrote. I'm going to go ahead and write another test that would actually match or expect against the values we're returning, the movies that we're gonna return. So I'm going to write return all movies, right? A simple description that tells what this test is all about. So to do that, first I am, there need to be some movies, in our database because I think if you are aware that we have different databases for tests and development. So when these tests run, we are actually inside the test mode, and our test database would be used. So I'm going to go ahead and create a simple helper, a simple movie beforehand. I'm going to explain it in a minute what I'm doing. So what this means is that we are creating a movie inside our database. This is actually a helper method provided us by RSpec to create any resource inside a database. To resource actually to create a database, create an object. That's it. So the create method is from the factory bot gem that helps us create factories of data. Predefined data sets or predefine any object of some data, object of some class. Right now we have a movie class. I'll show you. Yeah. So I have defined a simple factory over here that its name is movie. It has title, rating, and URL. So this is another gem called faker that gives us fake values. So every time it is executed, it returns us a different random values. So this thing actually does, what this thing does is it's actually it creates a database object. It creates a movie object into our database, test database, and stores it inside this movie variable. So what's different about let this method? Let bang means there are two versions to this method, let and let bang, the bang sign. What this does is it actually creates a variable called movie, but it won't it won't execute it unless or until we have used it. The let does that, but with the bang sign, what it does, it makes this variable available to us before every example run. This thing is called an example. It would be available to us before every example. So I'm going to go ahead and as because our spectrum shows that this is going to run before our examples, so I can actually expect that we have something in our database. So I'm going to go ahead and request all the movies inside our test database and store it into movies. And I'm going to go ahead and request the same URL, and I'm going to expect that the response, the body, should contain to be equal to movies, should be equal to movies. But as we are dealing with the JSON data format, this would be the body, the movies inside the body would be encoded into JSON encoded actually. So we need to parse them using JSON.parse. This will actually parse it, and we need to convert this to JSON first to encode it, to make it in JSON encoded string, and then on here we're going to do the same with this, right? So moment of truth, we're going to run the test, and let's hope it passes. All right, so this means our test has passed, and our test successfully returns a success code as well as the body. So to make more things more visually appealing, I'm going to go ahead into Postman and request the same URL and see what do we actually get. So we have our localhost 3000 API v1 movies. We have the get method, and I'm going to go ahead send a request to, and yes, as you can see, we have all the data that is in our database. So this was our one API. We actually congratulations, were actually able to test our first API that returns all the resources. But there are more APIs to deal with. So I'm going to go ahead and create one more API for you guys. So it would be to get a specific movie. We're going to pass in some ID, and it's going to return that specific movie. So before that, I'm going to go ahead and create that movie method. This actually could be refactored into refactored Droid actually to use it just once, and we can declare that on the top. But for this example, I'm going to go with the non-dry approach, so you guys can actually familiarize yourselves with the beginners who have joined us. I can familiarize themselves with RSpec. So I'm going to go ahead and create one more movie, and so this will be available to us beforehand, right? So I am test. So I'm going to test something that uh, what if our service is hit by a certain request that contains an ID that we don't have. Like we have 5 movies, I think. So that means if passed a wrong ID, we should return a 404 status for an invalid ID. Right? Makes sense. So I'm going to simply go ahead and make a GET request to the same URL, but this time I'm going to provide a invalid ID, and I'm going to expect that our the response I have the response dot uh, just a moment, yeah, just response. I'm going to expect the response should have the 404 HTTP status. So I'm going to use the function have HTTP status. I'm going to use 404. So right now we haven't developed any API for getting a specific movie. So clearly it's going to fail. Yeah, as expected, it actually failed. So this was our first API. I'm going to go ahead and use the DSC function to describe that our API returns specific movie. So in this API, the specific API, we are using a route param, maybe ID or maybe something movie ID, something like that. So we need to tell Grape that we will be using some parameter inside of our function, the API. So how are we going to tell that? We're going to tell the Grape by using a function called route param, and we're going to specify what kind of parameter in the URL we're going to use to excuse me, identify the movie. And I'm going to provide its type. It's going to be integer, and I'm going to pass a simple block to it. So the benefit of using this kind of block is that we tell that tell Grape that we're going to use the ID parameter in our URL, and it's going to be an integer. So what this type does is it actually also validates against the type of that ID of that parameter. If, for example, if we are passing some word, maybe hello world again, in our ID, so it will actually go ahead and validate that is it an integer or not, and it's going to fail. It's going to pass or return a validation error to the user. So let's go ahead and just define our basic API. So it means that it should give us an error when ID is wrong. So I'm going to go ahead and use a function, an error handling function provided by Grape, and pass in something that I could not found, and I'm going to pass a 404 error because we are expecting this thing on our test, because if we pass something, it's going to fail. This is the parameter, this is the scope of our test, so that it should pass. And we need to satisfy our test cases. Nice, it passed, because it's expecting a 404, and we actually are providing it 404. Now, I'm going to go ahead and write a simple test that actually returns, our API. Simple. So I'm going to go ahead and make a return specific movie, right? This is what our test is expecting, that it should return a specific movie if we hit the API. We have the movie. We can use this movie ID if you want. Yes, we're going to go ahead and see how this moves along. So I'm going to use the movie ID that we already have in the database. It should return that movie. So I'm going to expect against that. We expect JSON.parse response.body, and it should contain, because once we have parsed it, I'm expecting that this should contain a field by the name movie, and inside a movie there would be a field named title, and I'm going to expect that it should be equal to movie dot title, because we are requesting that same movie. It should be equal to that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and run this one more time, because I'm going to show you that it would fail. Yeah, it failed because it has nothing inside, the body. It's empty. So I'm going to go ahead and write a very simple uh, find call, find params. As you can see, I've used the params function. Grape also provides us the same function params as the Rails does. So right now, what we're going to do is, if right now it's going to produce an error, right? It's going to find the movie, and it's going to throw an exception that we really don't want. We only want that in case we have an error, and we're going to rescue it. What kind of error would it be? Record not found error. A record not found error. If there is a record not found error, only in that case we should throw an error, right? So I'm going to go ahead and run my test again. It still says that it failed. Right. We have that parameter over here. We're going to find that. Movie.find params ID. Let's it's saying that it does not have anything inside it. All right. I'm going to make a simple hash. that would actually contain a movie object. Yes, because it's going to pass a movie, right? Because we are expecting a movie inside the JSON response and title inside it. So we have that JSON, a kind of a hash would translate into a JSON object. So a movie in, and it would have that thing. Yep, and it passed. So far we have created two APIs and wrote specs about it. So right now, due to time constraints, I'm going to go ahead and do some develop other APIs and test on a faster speed. And but I'll be explaining that to you guys what's going on, right? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and copy some of the tests that I wrote earlier uh, to save us some time. So right now we are testing the post request to create a movie. What our params need is I have created the params method or variable uh, to contain a hash of this hash, and used the context blocks. Context blocks and describe blocks are exactly the same. They are alias of each other, but the name, the convention used is are different. We use context to actually literally define context in our test cases. So this context is going to test valid parameters if you're passing valid parameters, and this one I'm going to test if there's no parameter whatsoever. So I'm just going to run the valid ones first to show you that it would fail. Yeah. So yeah, we know it failed. So we know that we haven't developed our API yet. So I'm going to go ahead and quickly spin up uh, the API. So description method as same as above. What different here is this param block, right? So this param block tells Grape that we would be using these three parameters in this API, and one of them is required. So Grape would know to validate that when the request comes in. And the other two are optional. We don't need the URL and rating. And we have defined the types. What should be the types should be, and we have also added another step, another validation rule that won't allow it to be blank, won't allow title to be blank. And as we use the get function above in our APIs, we would use post as defined in the REST conventions. We would be using a post request. So when the request comes in, we're going to create a movie, and with those params. Right now, you can see a declared method. What this does is it's provided by Grape, and what this does it actually filters out all the parameters that we haven't provided. So declared, if we pass our params to declared, it will filter out all the variables that are here and pass to our return it actually. So we can use it anywhere. So for example, if we have paused a variable apart from these, like for example, some song or cast link, so that won't be passed to our movie, model. So once we are done with that, so once it passes out the parameters to movie model. So we can go ahead and save that into a variable and successfully send out a message. So I'm going to go ahead and test out this into a movie spec. I'm going to run this valid. Run the specs. So yeah, we have clearly passed our specs with that. So I'm going to go ahead and explain to you about how we're going to test the negative scenarios in this case when to test our validation rules. So as you know, we have declared a params variable up above. We're going to make that an empty because we are going to test that we should not allow blank values inside our movie model. So I'm going to go ahead and pass that request the post URL along with our params, and I'm going to expect that our body should contain an error, and it should be the message should be title is empty, right? I'm going to go ahead and just run because the code is already there. I'm going to show you. So yeah, it passed. So we have been coding a lot. So I'm going to go shift towards the Postman to test our APIs. As you know, as you can see, we have a few movies created. So I'm going to request the first one. I'm going to request it, and let's see this. And yes, our API works. We have a movie object, and it has an value. It has some values, right? So I'm going to quickly go ahead and test out a new API that we just created about the post to create new APIs. So how you actually go ahead and test in Postman is that you select the required appropriate method, the URL, and come inside body and use the raw option. So you can define all the variable inside that. So I'm going to go ahead and define, and I'm going to say, oh, yep. So I'm going to go ahead and request, let's see what happens. This, oh yeah, I forgot comma. So I'm going to go ahead and, yep, my movie is created. As you can see, a new movie by the name U, a rating 9, and some URL, and a clearly defined message that our movie was created, right? So I'm going to go ahead and test out if our validation works or not. So I'm going to skip out, remove the title attribute that was actually required, and see. So it's saying that title is missing and title is empty. And I'm going to pass some value. So blank value, so it actually does not create it. So I'm going to come here and request that. And yeah, our new movie is there. So so far we have done create and get and creating APIs. So I'm going to go ahead use the update API. So we can actually update our resources. It's very similar to our, host APIs. It's very similar. I have used the same, uh, uh, context to separate the valid params versus invalid params. And a new thing that I wanted to show you here is that like we declared the movie params and the above test, so you guys can refactor that using rather than writing hash like this, you guys can use the factory method that factory word provides us for attribute 4. This actually returns a simple hash, right? This just returns us a simple hash that we can use. So I have dried it. You guys can also use this in your test to make your test more dry. So yeah, we're going to cover this first. If we have developed params, that means we have a title, we have other things. So it's going to update our APIs, our movie resource, and return us, message, success message. In case of invalid params, how are we going to say that? We are going to delete the title attribute first to test the validation, and secondly we're going to update its value to nil, so we can test the allow blank validation in it. So I'm going to run the entire describe block so we move it faster. Yeah, so it failed as expected. So again, I'm gonna go ahead and quickly, copy the API for update. So as you can see, this is almost identical to post as far as the params option is required, params is concerned, and we are using the RESTful method put to describe, to tell Grape that any put request for update should be redirected to this block. So you're going to see that I've used raw param as in my presentation. I mentioned, I talked about when we're going to use put or update some resource, we need to provide the ID to identify and find that resource. So we're going to tell Grape that an ID would be passed into the route and you just give it to us, right? So as you can see, I have used, negative scenario. I've created negative scenarios if we don't get an ID and we don't find resource or movie. But if we do, we're going to update that. And if we don't, we're going to run into validation errors. So I'm going to go ahead and run my specs. So yeah, it passed. So we're going to quickly come into Postman, and I'm going to update a certain resource by the name, movie one to movie one. I'm going to rename it to Hello World. So movie updated successfully. If I don't provide any, it's going to give us the error. And it's same if we remove that. So this is so we have so far we have uh, done or created three kind of APIs in our thread application. Only remaining is the uh, delete API. So to stay consistent, I'm going to go ahead and quickly copy those things. So for delete, I have just two cases, valid ID or invalid ID. In case of valid ID, we would actually delete the resource and send out a message called deleted successfully. And if not, we will be returning error message that we didn't find any packet. So I'm going to run that, and obviously it will fail. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and quickly write the APIs. The lead API, it's very similar to what we have done so far. Route program that describes the ID. That you can provide the integer type over here to validate. And the more important thing is the lead HTTP verb method that we would use to tell Grape that to route all the delete requests to this block, right? So I'm going to go ahead and run our test specs one more time, and we're going to inshallah wrap this up. Yeah, so our API works. So let's quickly go ahead and to Postman and delete the number one movie with the ID 1. Yeah, movie deleted successfully. So now we're going to test like if it really deleted or not. So as you can see, there is no ID number one movie with us. So that means API certainly works fine, as we have proved with our test over here. So so this was all the APIs that we needed to make for a CRUD application to support our CRUD APIs. So this is the functionality that Grape gives us. As you can see, we haven't, it's not a big file. It's just around 60 lines of code, and you can actually create a CRUD application, a CRUD, CRUD application APIs for that. And still, right now, it's not very dry. You can use tons of other things if you go into the documentation. I have barely scratched the surface. There's too many things to explore. I would love if you guys would go ahead and explore this on your own, because I have given you a basic intro so you can get up and running using Grape, and explore that on your own. You will find it very powerful because of its features and the flexibility it actually gives us. So you can actually, if we go into the advanced thing, you can actually dry most of your code over here and put in somewhere else. So it would actually come up to like 20 or 30 lines of code. You can go ahead. You will see a huge difference when you do that. So I hope after going through this and seeing the power of Grape that it provides, you at least felt good. At least I, felt, very good about that. There are tons of other stuff that you can do, parameter documentation, you can redirect, you can do more things in, raising exceptions. So after that, you will be feeling so good, that the feeling I had when I created my APIs. I was like, oh, very good. It saved me a lot of time. So you guys should explore this on your own. I would highly appreciate if you have any questions. So put that in the comment section. I will definitely get back to most of them, inshallah. This experience has been really good. I highly appreciate you guys coming in, and I will definitely see you next time. Thank you for tuning in. Please do give me feedback. If you want to follow me on Medium, and thank you for your time. Allah Hafiz.